Good morning. It's nice to be back. I'm not going to forgive you for Lukey, though. I'm hoping John's memory's going to go and he's not going to remember to take that one back to West Denton, Lukey. I don't know if you like basketball, but one of the most famous basketball players ever was called Wilt Chamberlain. He's one of the best scorers in the history of basketball. He once scored 100 points in one game. Now, let's put that into perspective. Regularly, whole teams don't score 100 points in the game. So this guy scored 100 points himself in one game. I reckon it's probably the equivalent of a footballer scoring 10 goals in a game or something like that. Wilt Chamberlain, he was called. And the 100-point game, he shot 32 free throws. You might know what that is. It's where you get sort of a free shot. No one's going to challenge you. You stand a bit away from the basket, and you try and get it in for a point. But Wilt Chamberlain that day was shooting free throws differently. He took the ball, and he started between his legs, and he threw it up at the hoop. It's what is lovingly known as the granny shot. The granny shot. He made 28 out of 32 free throws. Now, that's about 85%, something like that. Why is that amazing? Well, in his career, he was famously useless at free throws. He used to score less than 50%. But that was when he shot the traditional way, like this. It's what everyone does. Most people shoot free throws like that. When he did that, he was useless. He scored like 30% of his free throws. For one season, he shot free throws like a granny. And his free throws were at least double as successful. Now, that's not the amazing part of the story. The amazing part of the story is that at the start of the next season, he went back to throwing free throws like this. Back to being terrible again. Even though he'd had a whole season that had told him, shoot like a granny, you'll score more. Why? Here's why. I felt silly. I felt like a sissy, he says. Another famous basketball player, Shaquille O'Neal, said this: I would rather shoot 0 free throws than shoot like a granny. I'd rather get none in the basket than shoot like that and people think I'm silly. One of the best scorers in history. He had this whole season of evidence, and yet, because he felt silly, he couldn't carry on. Now, if you are a Christian here today, I am calling you to shoot granny free throws. I am calling you, well, Jesus is calling you to live the right way, even though it makes you look silly. Even though the rest of the world will say, don't live like that. Don't live for that authority. Live for something else. Don't do it. Don't be like Wilt Chamberlain and give in to the world around you. Shoot the granny free throws. You see, there are all sorts of things that demand authority. That the world will say, you should worship this. Give your power to this. Serve this. But there is only one true authority. And that is how we're called to live. Let me walk you around my neighborhood. The family over the road from us, the dad is constantly doing DIY projects. Now, for me, a DIY project is, if I'm able to change a plug, that was like the year's work, okay? But this guy is renovating his whole house. It's non-stop. The next thing to happen is he's going to do up all his windows himself. Constantly. It's where he consumes all of his time. A lot of his money. Why? So that in a few years' time, they can flip the house and they can sell it on for more. You see, his authority is money. Making money. Next door to us, there's a family who we're getting to be good friends with. And over the last few months, the ma'am has spent seemingly all of her waking hours deciding on what school their little girl is going to go to. She could tell you things about the schools that even the teachers, I don't think, could tell you. I don't know how she does it. She knows everything about the local 5 primary schools, and she is just obsessed. What is the best choice for my child? Her authority in her life is her child and education. If they pick the right schools, that's the child's salvation. We've got a couple of doors up from us. We've got a couple who work hard, play hard. They've got 2 BMWs on the driveway. They work long hours, but then they go on massive, beautiful holidays. They've got all the gear. Their authority is the good life, success. And that is what drives all of their actions. The world will tell you that all of these things are good authorities to have. Good authorities. But the one that stands at the root of them all is yourself. Do what you want. Follow your own heart. Be who you want to be. Look after number one. Just follow what you want to do. And as Christians, we are called to shoot differently. We have a different authority. And it makes us look silly, perhaps. It makes us look different. But it is the right way. It is the right way. The true authority. And we're going to see that in our passage in a moment. But first, I just got to say, it's been over a year since I think I was here on a Sunday. And I can't believe how you've let things get. Rick's hair's grayer than ever. There's cake before the service. You've let someone come and preach in tracksuit bottoms. Now, who am I, you might say, to come and accuse you? Well, that is where the religious leaders in our story begin. Who is this guy who's come along and said that everything we're doing is wrong? The day before, Jesus has went through their temple, went through their church, if you like, and he's trashed the place. He's trashed it with his words, and he's trashed it physically. And I can't tell you how much I wanted to come up on the stage and trash something. I wanted to kick over some drums or push over the music stand, but I thought Rick might think I've gone too rogue. Jesus has come and trashed the place. Who does he think he is? Who does he think he is? And so on the surface, verse 28, their question might seem legitimate. Have a look down with me at verse 28. By what authority, Jesus, are you doing these things? But by what authority can you come into the temple and throw tables around? Who gave you authority to do this? Who gave you authority to tell us that our worship is corrupt, that we're not doing it right anymore? Seems like a fair question. But Jesus sees their hearts. And Jesus' response, his own question, reveals their hearts to themselves and to us. He asks them, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? Tell me. And they realize they can't answer. Because if they say that John's baptism was from heaven, well then, that gives authority to John. We should have listened to him. We should have done as he said. The authority goes to John and away from themselves. But if they say, no, John was just from earth, he was just a regular guy, then the people will no longer respect them. And their power is taken away from them by public opinion. And so do you see that what is driving their behavior, what is under the bonnet, is how do we hold on to our authority? How do we keep worshiping ourselves and not someone else? We don't want to give authority to John. We don't want to have authority taken away by the people. So we'll just say nothing. We'll just sort of cowardly just float back into the background. Let's not say anything. And Jesus has exposed what is really driving their behavior. They just want to be in charge. They don't actually care about the answer to the question. See, what they're hoping will happen is Jesus will say, I am God's man. I'm from heaven. You should listen to me. And then they'll say, blasphemy. We can get rid of Jesus. We'll be in charge. Get rid of Jesus. No one will follow him anymore. We'll be in charge again. Or Jesus will say, I'm just a regular guy like you. And then they can say, great, we don't have to listen to you then. We're still in charge. Do you see? What they are concerned about, although they wrap it up in this religious question, that is just a disguise to conceal their own selfishness, so they can carry on worshiping themselves, so that they can keep their authority as them and not as John or Jesus. They don't want to have to do what Jesus says. Well, you might have friends who aren't trusting in Jesus, and they'll often have really good questions. And we should always try and answer their questions. We should also acknowledge that we don't always have the answers. We don't. Christianity doesn't have all the answers to every question that you can ask. But we should try and answer them. But we do need to be aware that for some people at least, these questions will just be an intellectual or emotional wrapping paper disguised to hide the true fact of their heart. I don't want to do what Jesus says. I don't want him to be the authority in my life. I'm quite happy with the authority in my life being money, success, the good life, my kids, me. Ultimately, that is what is going on in people's heart. And sometimes we just need to acknowledge that. You know, even if I could answer all your questions, you just don't want to submit to Jesus' authority. What's funny about this passage is Jesus says, well, I'm not going to tell you by what authority I do these things at the end of chapter 11. And then he goes on to tell a parable which tells them exactly where his authority comes from to do these things. It also exposes their hearts further. More than that, though, this parable is basically the story of the human race played out once again. It's the story of my life, your life, their lives, all of humanity. Let's have a look at it together. Look at verse 1 of chapter 12. Jesus begins to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it. He dug a pit for the winepress and built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. So what happens first? Someone, the owner, takes care to build a vineyard. A lot of effort goes into this. He has some land, maybe he's bought the land. He then has to dig up the land. He has to build things, put in the infrastructure. Growing a vineyard for wine is a very laborious process. If you've ever seen one, you've seen how carefully lined up everything is. The conditions have to be just right. Everything has to be perfect. This owner takes great care in making sure his vineyard is looked after. He even installs the watchtower to make sure it is secure. And this parable is saying that that is what God has done for Israel. He's established them. He's taken great care to establish them as a nation. He brought them out of Egypt, brought them out of Egypt, brought them through and into a promised land, set them up with the law and the sacrificial system, gave them everything they needed to be blessed. That's what he does. But we can extend it, can't we? God has done that for everyone in the world. He has given so much for people to enjoy. Apparently, in the average lifetime, your heart will beat 2.5 billion times. God has given you each of those 2.5 billion heartbeats. You do nothing to do that, but God is sustaining it 2.5 billion times just for one person. You will breathe in and out 246 million liters of air. And God provided and sustained every single one of those liters so that it was breathable, that it was good, that it went in and it went out. If you eat 3 meals a day for your whole life, you'll eat about 86,000 meals. God has provided, on average, 86,000 meals in someone's lifetime for them. Put it before them for them to enjoy. God gives. God gives. And therefore, He is in charge. He is the owner. He has the authority. There's a new series of Planet Earth on at the moment, if anyone's watching it. Oh man, these shows are incredible. And there's one story in particular, one animal in particular I want to share with you, and that's an octopus. And this octopus lives in the depths of the ocean, where it is like freezing cold. And it wants to go and lay its eggs. But in the current climate that it's in the ocean, it would take 10 years, because of the cold, for their eggs to mature and grow into fully fledged little octopus, okay? So the octopus, the female octopus, swims to a slightly warmer place in the ocean, where it will only take 2 years for her eggs to grow. So she settles in on the ocean bed. She has many eggs, and they sort of need oxygenating. She has to squirt air all over them constantly. She's there for 2 years. She doesn't move for 2 years. She provides them with everything they need to grow. Everything. For 2 years. In the freezing cold, she doesn't eat anything. She spends the whole time blowing air on these eggs, ensuring that they're growing. So 2 years pass, and the eggs start to hatch. Do you know what these little octopi do? They come out of their egg, and this is my octopus impression. They swim away from their mum. And on planet Earth, this octopus, right, doesn't even look back at its mum. 2 years she spent freezing cold, not eating anything, sat on that egg, blowing air on it. 8 legs, won't even use one to like wave goodbye. Not a single thank you card written with 8 legs. But that is a picture of humanity. It's a picture of these Israelite leaders. God gives them everything they need. And off they swim without so much of a glance back. When the owner comes to the vineyard looking for some fruit, what does he find? Well, he sends his men and they throw him away. They beat him up. They even kill some of them. The prophets throughout the Old Testament, this is what happened to them. God sending his men to them to say, where's the fruit? Come back to me. And over again, they don't listen. They swim off in the other direction. And that is the story of humanity. That is what we do. God has given us those 86,000 meals, those breaths of air, and we just swim away. Where's the fruit? God says. Till one day, he has one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, verse 6, saying, they will respect my son. But the tenants said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they took him and killed him, and they threw him out of the vineyard. This is how they treat God's beloved Son. If you've been going through Mark, twice in Mark, God says, this, Jesus, this is my Son. I'm pleased with him. Listen to him. What do they do with the Son? I tell you what, if we can get rid of him, there's no one else left. It's all ours. Do you see that attitude that we thought about before? If we can push Jesus out, if we can get rid of him, we will stay in charge. If I can get rid of Jesus, I will stay in charge. That's the attitude. It's the same attitude of the leaders. It's the same attitude for all of humanity. Let's get rid of him. That's where it leads. Let's kill God. Let's silence him once and for all. What does this have to do with granny shots? What does it have to do with our lives? What does it have to do with living freely, living wonderfully? Well, here's two things as we finish. The first thing is that this is a warning. This is a warning. And let me speak first of all to you. If you have never accepted Jesus' authority over your life, this is a serious warning. Because do you see what happens to those who ultimately have rejected the Son? Verse 9, what will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and he will kill those tenants and he will give the vineyard to others. He will come and he will judge them. You know, one day those who have not accepted his authority will not be able to live in his kingdom. I mean, why would they? If he's the king, you wouldn't even want to be there. He's the authority. If you've never done that business with God, if you've never said, okay, Jesus, he is the one with authority, this is such a big warning. Come to him. Allow him to have authority over your life. But Christians, there's a warning here for us too. Remember who this is being told to. This is being told to the religious elite. The people who knew their Bibles, who were in the temple every day, who gave sacrificially, who prayed amazing prayers, and yet this is directed at them. Jesus says to them, where do you think authority lies? If you try and imagine your life as, you know, in the temple court where Jesus went around and tipped over the tables, try and imagine your life is sort of set out on those tables. Your job, your relationships, your marriage, your education, you know, they're all on a different table. And Jesus approaches each one. Which one are you worried that he's going to take authority over? Which one are you thinking, oh man, he might trash that place? Jesus' authority says this. He says, go and make disciples of all nations. Make that a priority in your life. He says, go and love. Go and love everyone, your enemies and your friends. Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me. That is, live a life of sacrifice. He says, don't be anxious about tomorrow. Trust God. Those are the commands that you are to follow if you live under Jesus' authority. Do you think your little tables in your life are doing that well? Is your priority at work to love? To make disciples? Is your priority when you come along to church to take up your cross? To serve other people? Is your next life move for your own pleasure, for your own enjoyment, for your own satisfaction? Or is it to love, to be sacrificial, to make disciples? Is where you spend all of your thinking time and lie awake at night being anxious about tomorrow, worrying about what's going to happen? Well, bring it under Jesus' authority. Bring it under Jesus' authority. This is a warning. All of our lives, every table that you might lay out is under Jesus' authority. Bring it under his authority. The warning, but let's finish with this. This is a great comfort. This is a great comfort. We all serve something. We all give authority to something. Jesus is the best place to give authority to. You know, the end of that octopus story is that after 2 years, that octopus has been lying on the ocean floor, freezing, starving, and she dies. She dies so that her babies can go free. And there's a very small picture there of how God, Jesus, uses his authority. He has the ultimate authority over life and yet chooses to die to set his people free. He could come on earth and demand everything from everyone, and instead he says, I have come to serve, not to be served. His authority is one of service. It is like a parent's authority over a child. I command my children to do lots of things. But just think about what some of the things are. Sam, hold my hand when we're crossing the road. Sam, come in here and eat your dinner. I've made your favorite meal. Sam, come and have a rest. Come and sit on the sofa and have a rest. Sam, don't worry about that. Daddy will sort that out. That is what good authority looks like. That is what Jesus' authority looks like, and he does it much better than I do. But you see, it's an authority that cares, an authority that serves, and his every command is that you might live life to the full. To shoot the free throw the best you can. His authority is wonderful, and he is the cornerstone which will last into eternity. He is marvelous in our eyes. The world will tell us what we should serve, the different authorities, but don't be taken in. Even if you look silly, different priorities, even if it's very different, even if it's hard, it is wonderful to submit to Jesus' authority. Let me pray for us that we would do that.